Should you upgrade the barrel on your Tikka T1x? Keep watching to find out. I'm John McQuaid with 8541 Tactical, and today we are going to talk about the Tikka T1x and the Lothar Walther barrel that we've installed on it. Now, a while back, we did a review of the Tikka T1x in factory trim, so with the fantastic plastic stock on it and the sporter diameter factory barrel on it. And my opinion of that rifle then was that it is a very, very good option for National Rifle League 22 competition, and it is an absolute stellar option for just a backyard plinking rifle. There are quite a few upgrades for the Tikka T1x available, so we couldn't leave our stock for very long. So as soon as we got done with the factory review, we went ahead and started heading down that upgrade path. One of the first things we did was we took that barrel to action and we dropped it into the MDT ACC chassis. Now, of course, our Mail Call Mondays episodes are sponsored by MDT, and they were kind enough to send us out the chassis for the T1X to see how it works. Now, the chassis isn't exactly for the T1X, it's actually for the T3, but the T1X and the T3 pretty much share the same footprint, and because the magazine system for the T1X is attached to the bottom of the receiver, not to the stock, then it drops right into the T3 and you still get your removable magazine and you still utilize the same factory magazines. The only change you really have to make is you have to remove the magazine release for the T3 from the chassis so that it doesn't interfere with the magazine. So dropping it into the chassis was easy as can be. In it goes, 2 screws, tighten them down, we're good to go. We still do have the factory trigger in here because so far I have really found that the factory trigger is more than sufficient for this rifle. It adjusts very low and we're good to go. Then of course we put some Stark shooting accessories on it. We put one of their shroud covers on here, which is aluminum and replaces the plastic option. And then we put this really awesome swept bolt handle that they make, which really gives the action a different feel. It makes it feel more like a TRG or like an AI when you're running the ball handle. So that was just a few of the upgrades that we made to it, but we had left the factory barrel alone because it was a very, very good performer. We were getting anywhere from 3/4 to half MOA performance out of it, but it did have a thin profile, and I was wondering really how much better accuracy we could get out of the action going with a aftermarket barrel. So we jumped on the phone and called Lothar Walther, and they were happy enough to send us out 2 barrels. They actually sent us the 22 long rifle barrel, and then they sent us a 17 Mach 2 barrel for it as well. Not hugely big on the 17 Mach 2, mainly because it's not legal for NRL 22 competition, and I don't think it really fills a great niche for what I want to do with a rimfire rifle. Now, if you like shooting varmints or you like hunting rabbits at longer ranges or that kind of stuff, then the 17 Mach 2 offers some significant advantages over the 22 long rifle, but 22 long rifle still is the king as far as ammunition availability during most time periods. Sometimes you run into these strange political climates where it makes it difficult to get large quantities of 22 because of the panic buying problems. But that's for a totally different subject for a different day. So we went ahead and got the barrel in, and the barrel right out of the bag looked great, really nice, even finish to it. They even put some really kind of cool engraving on it just for us. But overall, the barrel looked great, and the Tikka, on the face of it, you would think a barrel replacement would be very easy for it. It is just a slip fit barrel, and you have 3 Torx set screws on the bottom of the action that allow you to remove the barrel. They are T15 Torx. Most of us have a T15 Torx laying around, so you would think it would be really easy just to unscrew those screws, pull the factory barrel out, put in your aftermarket barrel, screw it back in, and get to shooting. Unfortunately, that is not how it worked out. The first thing that we found is that when Tikka puts the screws in, they put them in there almost permanently. They are not really intended to come out. Again, this is great if you're just going to take the rifle out of the box as a factory shooter and shoot it for your entire life, because it is a 22 barrel. You are likely not going to wear it out unless you really abuse the barrel and you pit it through corrosion or something of that nature. At first, I thought they used some kind of really heavy-duty thread locker on it. That would make sense because we later found out that the barrel is actually glued into the receiver with some type of adhesive or thread locker. But funny enough, I actually got a photo from one of our other viewers after they heard about the trouble we were having with our Tikka barrel. And they actually had a T1X out of the box. They took it out of the factory plastic stock, and it had a broken off Torx bit in one of the screws. So apparently they are using an incredible amount of torque to drive those set screws into the receiver to the point that they're even breaking their own bits doing it. So I went through, initially tried to get the set screws out, because usually a T15 is not set in so tightly that I can't break it loose by hand with a screwdriver handle. But that didn't work really well. Switched over to a small ratchet handle. That snapped off Torx bits by two different manufacturers, and these were US-made Torx bits. They are not just cheap Amazon or Harbor Freight bits. What I eventually ended up having to do in order to get the barrel out was I had to hit it with a propane torch to heat everything up, and using a longer ratchet handle, I was actually able to break everything loose, get everything out. And then, of course, I noticed the adhesive on the barrel shank that had been holding it in. And thankfully, we didn't actually damage any of the screws. Now, it took me quite a bit of effort to get that busted piece of the Torx bit out of the screw before we could actually remove all of them. But it ended up some Croil and a rare earth magnet along with a dental pick to wiggle it around a little bit allowed me to pull that bit out without actually having to drill that set screw. So just a word of caution, when Tikka puts these guys in, they do not intend them to come back out. So it is stuck in there really, really well. So got all that out, cleaned up the bore of the receiver, cleaned everything out, looked at Lothar Walther's barrel installation instructions, because the barrel actually comes with a notch cut in the shank, just like you would see with a 1022 barrel. And they use an interesting setup in order to pull that barrel back in and headspace the barrel. So the outer screws, you're supposed to use just the regular flat-headed set screws, but the middle screw is a pointed screw, and it goes against the notch in the barrel, and that gives you your headspace. So kind of an interesting setup. I made sure I read the directions on torque settings and all that fun stuff. I went ahead and put some anti-seize on the barrel, went to slide it in the receiver, and of course it didn't fit. So we tried a little bit of this, a little bit of that. There was nothing on the instructions stating that we were going to have to fit the shank to the receiver. So first things first, I said, all right, we'll try the cold and the heat. So threw the barrel in the freezer, left it there overnight, came back the next day, busted out the torch, heated up the receiver. We're not talking cherry red here. We're just talking, we heat up the receiver. I usually will run it up until any of the solvent or any of the grease starts to smoke on it a little bit. We're not getting it overly hot. I was using a digital thermometer to make sure that I wasn't getting the steel to a point where we're removing any of the hardness from it. We're not trying to temper the steel or anything. So got the receiver hot, went to slide the barrel in. It went in a little ways, then it stopped. Then, of course, the barrel shank sucks heat out of the receiver. The barrel shank swole, and we seized everything up. we stuck them both together, and it was a hell of a job to get them back apart. Got them back apart. There was a little bit of galling on the barrel shank, so now we had to get out the emery cloth and we had to start polishing the barrel shank to try to get it in. This went on for a little while. I managed to get it polished down to where everything would fit together. We got it installed. We went ahead and torqued it back to spec. And I noticed that when I used the torque spec that they had set, I could actually feel the barrel move a little bit when I locked down the bolt handle. So that told me that the barrel was not held as tightly in the receiver as it should have been. So all kinds of other problems. We ran into some pretty stiff bolt closing, and that makes me nervous on rimfire ammunition because I don't know how hard you're squeezing that rim before you actually get it locked down. So again, ran into more problems there. So we called Lothar Walther up. Of course, they were nice enough to say, hey, pack everything up, send it back. We sent the action and both barrels back to them. They went ahead and mic'd everything out, measured it out, cleaned it up, installed the barrel, and sent it back to us with a little bit of information. So the actual bore of the receiver is out of round. They obviously have test fit their barrels on a couple of different Tikka receivers. They found one of their Magnum receivers was significantly out of round and was significantly out of spec versus the rimfire receiver. The standard 22 receiver, that one was okay that they had. This one obviously was not, and when they measured it, it was out of round at the 12 and the 6, so it's kind of egg-shaped. And that may have been because the heat treating and drilling the holes, because you got to remember you have holes up top for the scope base, and you have holes in the bottom for the barrel mounting screws. So top and the bottom, there's nothing machined or milled out of the sides. So just speculating, that may have caused the material to relax depending upon how Tikka does their heat treating, whatever. But it seems like the factory takes up for that by gluing the barrels in. And once you glue the barrel in, obviously it's not going to move. The drawback to gluing the barrel in is that pretty much prevents you from being able to do any kind of switch barrel magic. And with 3 set screws on the bottom, you would think that switch barrel would be a pretty simple thing with this receiver. So we got it back from Lothar Walther. We went ahead and dropped it back in the chassis, took it out to the range, shot it. The first few groups were not absolutely spectacular, but then we settled in and found out it likes Lapua Center X fairly well. And once we got the barrel seasoned in, because 22s do like a few rounds to lay down that lube, lay down that lead coating, and although this is a lapped finished barrel, you still want to get some rounds through it before you start really judging the accuracy on it. After that, we were still back down into that about half MOA area for 5-shot groups at 50 yards. So with all that trouble, everything said and done, we were still really about the same place we were with accuracy with the factory barrel. Now, I want to make sure you guys understand, this is no dig on Lothar Walther. They produce a great barrel. Moreover, this is kind of a thumbs up for Tikka because they apparently produce a great barrel. Now, thumbs down for Tikka because they glue the dang thing into the receiver and make it very difficult to get out, very difficult for you at home to do any upgrades on the actual rifle itself. So it's kind of a give and take there. Now, once we've gotten everything set up and we got dialed in, I did notice 2 different things. First of all, with the factory barrel, when I put the suppressor on it, the Gemtech Outback 2, which is not a heavy barrel, we lost about a half a mil of elevation on our 0 at 50 yards. So when I screwed the suppressor on, I pretty much knew I had to come up 5 clicks on the scope to be pretty much zeroed with the suppressor. With the Lothar Walther barrel, we did not have any of that. The barrel obviously resists any kind of droop or resists any kind of harmonic difference by hanging the suppressor on there. But the Lothar Walther barrel is significantly thicker. It is pretty much a full bowl barrel. So you have about the same diameter at the muzzle as you do back here at the breech. The shank is actually smaller than any other portion of the barrel, save the actual threading right here at the end. Accuracy has been great. Consistency has been great. One other problem that we ran into, though, once we got everything put back together and we got dialed in, we ran out of elevation in the Bushnell forge. Shouldn't say elevation. It's more we ran out of declination. I can't dial the scope low enough right now to get a full 0. I am about 5/10 shy of a actual correct 0. Now I do have a mark in the rifle scope in the reticle of the forge that I can use as my 50-yard aiming point, but we're going to end up having to either change the base out, shim the base, or we're going to have to put a, well, I shouldn't even say shim the base because we have a DIP scope base that is in the factory receiver dovetail, so we actually would need to shim the rings to be able to get it to work correctly. So that's something I still have to troubleshoot a little bit on it, but now that we have everything back together and everything is said and done, I'm fairly satisfied with the performance of the Lothar Walther barrel. Unfortunately, I can't in good conscience recommend that the average user go ahead and swap out the barrel on their T1X because of the huge pain in the butt it actually is to swap this thing out. So if you are contemplating purchasing a Rimfire 22 with the idea of doing some kind of switch barrel setup, I would have to say go with something like the CZ457. Lothar Walther does make a barrel for the CZ457, and I will assume that you would get similar performance with that. We may try to get a hold of one of those a little bit later and throw on our 457. So that's it for this video over the T1X and the Lothar Walther barrel. So now my question to you is, first of all, if you don't have a T1X, how likely are you to buy a T1X after you watch this versus something like a CZ457? Secondly, if you have a T1X now with the factory barrel on it, how likely are you to buy a replacement barrel for it? And lastly, if you got a T1X, are you just going to shoot it in factory condition? Are you happy with its performance so far? Please drop a comment in the comment section down below or send it to us on Facebook or Twitter. If you like the video, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. If you want to help support the content that you guys have grown to know and love, please come check us out over on Patreon. We'd love to have you over there. We'd love to talk to you a little bit behind the scenes, and we'd love to have your support to help keep the lights on. Until next time, get out and shoot.